close till I get up.
Hello me, and I am a full stack developer. So today marks the beginning of my main stack tutorial. This series of video is meant for me to remind myself of how main stack works, to make sure I stay sharp in the main stack space. So I'm glad if this video will be able to help others out there. So what we have on the screen here is a terminal that I have entered into the main folder I created for this series of videos. So it's just a terminal somewhere in my folder history, and here is the folder opened in the Finder window. This video is being made on a MacBook. You can also follow on a Windows PC. So let's go ahead and create our API. Also, what we're building in this tutorial will be a full stack application with React, Mongo, Express, and Node.js. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using Node.js version 16. You can use the stable version at the time you are watching this video. So for the first step in the video, let's create a folder to contain our API code. So I'm going to create the folder by running a command mkdir, which this command creates a folder at your current location. So let's name this folder API. So you see where I've created the API folder. Let's go into the API folder. Then in the API folder, we are going to initialize a node project. And to initialize a node project, you have to have node installed on your system and npm also. So you just run npm init to initialize a node project inside your API folder. Currently inside the API folder is empty. After running this command, you are asked to enter the package name. This is the default name that they have in the brackets. If you're not okay with it, you can change it. So I'm going to change it to main tutorial API. The version is the default version. I'm okay with the default version. The description. So this is the backend for full stack tutorial. So entry point of our API, let's leave it as index.js. Test command, we can leave it empty. Git repository, we can leave it empty. Keywords, we can leave it empty. Author, you can choose to write your name. I'm just going to write my name there. And the license, I always use MIT. Then you confirm by entering yes, it is okay. As you can see, we have now a new package.json file. So we have successfully initialized our API project. So we have the package.json folder now. Every node project always ships how do I put this? The package.json file describes the entire application, like the dependencies it uses, the command to start the application, and so on and so forth. So let's open this folder in our code editing tool. For this tutorial, I'll be using VS Code, Visual Studio. So I'm just going to drag this folder to the VS Code icon here. I'm going to drag it to the VS Code. So I have to open it in VS Code. So as you can see, the API folder is opened in VS Code. So let's take a look at our package.json. We have our main tutorial API has the name, the version, the description. The entry file is index.js. The script, we didn't enter a script, so let's just leave that test script empty for now. And the author is me, and the license is MIT. So in this API folder, let's go ahead and create the entry file. That'll be index.js. But I want to put everything, all our code for the app in a source file. So let's create a new folder called source src. And the source folder, I'm going to create an index.js. Okay, so let's come and change our main entry to source/index.js, right? Because our index file is now inside a source folder. It is no longer at the root directory. So source index.js. So in our index.js file, this is where the beginning of our application will reside. So I always like to have an app.js file also. So I'm just going to come here and create an app.js file. So we create app.js file and our index.js file. Index.js file is the entry point and it's going to reference to this app.js file. So before we continue writing code in our app.js file, I'm going to install some dependencies in this our API project. So I go back to the terminal. The terminal is currently in the API folder. So we're going to install a package by running a command. That is npm, this is node package manager install. You can shorten it as npm I. Then we're going to install express. Now that we have express installed, you can see you now have a new node modules folder. Node modules folder contains all the dependencies you have installed in your app. Node modules folder. So another point to note is when you're creating a new project, you also have to initialize an empty Git repository. So to do this, you should have Git installed on your system. So you just run through the command git init. So initialize an empty repository in your current folder. So after initializing an empty repository in your current folder, we're going to create a new file in the root called gitignore. Inside this gitignore file, you are going to specify the files that Git should ignore, that should not be added to Git repository, files that are not necessary, or files that you store your security keys. For example, the node modules file should not be stored in your Git repository because it is always large. It just make your repository unnecessarily big. So I'm going to enter the node modules file, and the node modules can just simply represent it by entering node modules. So once you save this file, once you save the file name, you can see that the node modules folder is grayed out. Green means we have untracked changes. I'm using an extension on my VS Code called GitLens that allows me to see the files that have untracked files green, untracked changes is usually yellow, then deleted you see red. Okay, so let's see another example of adding files to gitignore. Let's say I for some reason I want to ignore index.js from my repository. I'm just going to enter the path to index.js. So index.js is inside source / index.js. So if I save this, you can see that index.js is also grayed out and it will not be added to the Git repository. But we definitely want our index.js in our Git repository, so I'm going to remove this line from the git ignore file. So let's go ahead and make our first commit. So let's do git add all. This command adds all the untracked files to Git. Then we're going to create a commit, git commit initial commit. So I implore you guys to Google search on Git and try to learn more on Git. This is not a Git tutorial. We're not going to go in depth into the Git commands. We're not going to go in depth into the Git commands. So git commit initial commit. So you can see that all your files have been added and they're all back to white. So let's proceed. We have installed our dependency Express. You can see it here, Express. So it gives you the version of Express you have installed. So you close the package.json. So in app.json, we're going to import Express. So const Express is equal to require. You import the package you install by requiring it in a file. Most of the time, it is advised to do all your imports at the top of the file. So const Express is equal to require Express. So now that we have Express, we can create our Express application and call it app. Const app is equals to what? Is equals to Express. Export this app. We're going to export this app from this file so that any other file can access our app. So we do that in Express by using module.export. This is telling me what is this module, this file, what is it exporting. Is it exporting a string? Is it exporting an object? But in our case, we want to export the app. So export app. So what we did here is we imported Express from using require and set it to an Express variable. Using the Express variable, we created our app. So and we exported our app. So in the index.js file, we are going to import the app in the index.js file. App is equals to require. So where our app is located at, so we use the ./app. So it is located in the same directory as index, but just different name, ./app. This is how you import something. So we also want to require HTTP. So const HTTP is equals to require HTTP. So after requiring app and HTTP, we're going to create a server. So const server is equal to http dot create server. Now this create server function requires a variable, like an attribute, a parameter, and the name of the parameter is a request listener. It requires a request listener. So our request listener in this case will be our app. It's going to be our app that's going to be listening to our requests. So after creating the server, we just listen. Server.listen. Server has to listen at a particular port. This is the port number of the server. So I'm going to create a variable up. We're going to call it port. So for now, we're just going to assign 3000 to the port 3000. So server listing at port. So when we're going to pass also a callback function that gets called whenever the server has started listening for incoming requests. So when the server is live, we just want to tell ourselves that yeah, the server is live now. So we're just going to log to the console.log server listening on port. So let's change this double quotes to backticks. Server listening, so that we can use string literals on port. Again, I expect us to have basic JavaScript knowledge. So backticks is used to write strings in a way you can embed variables in them instead of using the plus symbol. This is much more neater. So just like that, we have a working Express server. So we're just going to test our theory by coming to our API in the terminal. You can also use the terminal inside VS Code. When you go here, you click on terminal and click on new terminal to bring out this terminal in your app directory. But I would like to use the external terminal so that I give you guys more viewing space. So to run the application, I would like to, you can always run the application by running a command like node src/index.js. Since this is our entry file, like we said earlier, and this is the location of the entry file inside our API folder. So if you run this command, you can see that the application is listening on port 3000. But we're not going to do it this way, so we're going to have the command stated in our package.json file inside our script. So we're going to add a new command. I'm going to call the command start. And what the command will do when it is called is run node source index.js. So instead of typing out the entire command when you want to start your application, you can just run it by using npm run start, and you can see that it is running the same command and your server is listening at port 3000. Now to test that the server actually responds to requests, we are going to add a dummy route rather, so that we can send a request to the server. So this is your listener app that we exported and was imported and used in our HTTP server. So we're going to add a listener to this, a route to this listener. So app.use. So which route do we want to use? Let's say we want to use /health. So now, after using app.use, you enter the route you want to listen. We want this callback to take an effect on, right? The route you want this callback to take an effect on, you enter it first. If you want all routes, if you want this callback to have an effect on all routes coming through the listener, you can skip entering the route, and this callback will be called whenever any request is made to the server. So let's first define the function to send health message, right? Const send health message. Now everything that goes here in the use function of this our app from Express is a middleware, and all these middleware are being passed certain variables. They are passed a request variable, they are passed a response variable, and they are passed a next variable. And in cases whereby there is an error variable comes here, right? So let's just forget about the error for now. We'll talk about that later. So this is the general structure of the middleware that we use with this app.use function. So we take in these variables. So this is the function defined. This function is this is an anonymous function, so we can pass it here. So what happens is when app.use, when this function is called, app.use passes request, rest, and next to it, right? So for every request that comes in through this server, it's going to send the request to this function. So let's just say we are not using the request to do anything. So I usually like to make it less. I usually like to make unused parameters invisible. So all I want to do now is just to send back a response. So we're just going to do return res.send. Let's say server is healthy. Okay, server is healthy. So we are also not using next, so I'm just going to remove it totally. So this is a request, but because we're not using it, let me just leave like that. So request and response. So all I want to do is for every request that comes into our server, whether it is a get request, whether it is a post request, it is just going to come here and send the request to this function, and this function terminates the request by returning a response saying server is healthy. So let's test our theory by restarting our server so that the change can be visible. So npm run start, server is running at port 3000. So let's go to our browser at localhost :3000. So if you check it, you can see our message, server is healthy. So thank you guys, we have successfully created our baby API, our baby Express API application, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you, goodbye.